Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of SEC Power Rankings. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below, and let's jump right into it. Number 16, we always start out at the bottom, Mississippi State. They won their game last week versus UMass. Really not much to say here about Mississippi State. They have been at the bottom of these power rankings, I think, every week other than one. And I think Kentucky fell to 16 at one point. But they began the season losing to Toledo, and there really has not been a upside here. Just not a good football team. And the question is, how long does Jeff Lebby last there? Who knows? I personally didn't love the hire when it came in. They do have some weapons on the outside with Kevin Coleman, Mario Craver, and those guys. Michael Van Buren's been pretty good at the quarterback position, but overall, just not a great football team. Not much to say here. They put up a little bit of a fight versus Tennessee this week, but not much. They are my number 16 team. Number 15, had a bye this week, Kentucky. Honestly, one of the biggest disappointments in the SEC. A team, in my opinion, that I thought had the talent to go 7-5, 8-4. They're not going to be bowl eligible this year. And I think there's a real shot Mark Stoops is fired at the end of the year. And it's pretty interesting to think about this. If you would have asked most fans who gets fired at the end of the year, Mark Stoops or Billy Napier, 95% of people would have said Billy Napier. There might have been some Kentucky fans or some Florida fans that are high on Billy Napier that said, hey, I think Mark Stoops gets fired. But I think there's a real possibility that Mark Stoops gets fired before Billy Napier, and that is crazy to think about. Number 14, speaking of those Florida Gators, and it is number 14, Florida Gators, got absolutely skull-dragged by my favorite team. You can see behind me the Texas Longhorns. Did not look good. I didn't think it was going to look good. I think I predicted 41-10 if Aiden Warner played. I was pretty close. Florida scored a touchdown more. Texas basically scored a touchdown more. I mean, you're on your third-string quarterback. He's a walk-on from Yale. I didn't really expect much here, but I thought you should have put up a little bit more of a fight in the first half because that Texas did kind of sputter early on, and then once I got going, it was over, and you never got going as an offense. Your defense helped you out a little bit, but not much. You got pressure early on, but kind of it dwindled away down the stretch. I think that's a lack of depth there. Their recruiting class also isn't very good. I've been actually on the train of keeping Billy Napier because I don't think there's a coach out there you can hire that makes you a national championship team. I still believe that. I don't think Lane Kiffin's a national championship head coach. And you have the same schedule next year with his talent. I honestly think at this point, the way, especially with the Florida basketball coaching news, I think you have to ride it out, even though it probably isn't the best decision. I honestly don't know what to do if you're Scott Strickland. Number 13 is Auburn. Another team I came in high on. I thought they'd be 8-4. They're going to be lucky to be bowl eligible. And there's some crazy stats about them being a top 40 offense and a top 40 defense. And both the times that has happened, Auburn, I believe, went to a national championship game or won the national championship and then won like 10 or 11 games the other time. And this year they're probably going to be 6-6. That's pretty crazy. There's been a lot of bad luck, I guess you could say, but it's also the point of they do not execute down the stretch to win these close football games. And I think, honestly, that's a quarterback and Hugh Freeze issue. I think once Hugh Freeze gets his quarterback in there, that may change. If it doesn't, then it's on Hugh Freeze, and Hugh Freeze will not last long. But for right now, he can blame Peyton Thorne. So they are my number 13 team. My number 12 team, the only reason they're ahead is because they beat Auburn earlier in the year. But I honestly think if they played again, Auburn might win. But I still have to give respect to that. Number 12, I do have Oklahoma. They should have beat Missouri, but again, they're just not good at finishing down the stretch in games they can win. There hasn't been many games this year that they can win down the stretch. They've kind of gotten blown out in all their big games. I think they're going to get blown out versus Alabama and LSU coming down the stretch. They're going to miss a bowl game for the first time since 1998. So again, Brent Venables, you are on the hot seat going into next year. It's going to be very interesting what happens there, but they are my number 12 team. Number 11 is Missouri. They are going to be one of, if not the worst, 10-2, even if they lose another game, 9-3 teams I've ever seen. They are not a good football team. If they were to play Florida's schedule, they would probably be what Florida's going to be, which is 5-7. They're just not a good football team. And Brady Cook being out even makes them a worse football team because, I mean, the backup quarterback just isn't it right now. Luther Burden is not getting the ball enough still. That's something I harped on early on, and they just still haven't given him the ball enough. Theo Weiss is really good, but you have two really good wide receivers, and that's basically it on your team. Your defense is average. Your running game is good, but not great. And Brady Cook, when he's in, is good, but not great. So Eli Drinkowitz after the game saying, hey, we're still eligible for the college football playoff. Yes, technically you are. In reality, there's no chance this team makes the college football playoff. They have no resume. They don't look good either. So they're not passing the eye test and they don't pass the resume test. No chance this team makes the playoff. Number 10, I have Vandy. I think they're going to end up being a 7-5 football team. They're a good football team, but they're just not a great football team. You saw that versus South Carolina. They were overwhelmed by that defensive front, just like most people are. South Carolina's a good football team. If South Carolina didn't lose to LSU, they probably would make the college football playoff. That's how good they are. But Vanderbilt down the stretch, they are what they are. Are they an improved Vanderbilt football team? Yes. Are they great? No. Are they good? Yeah, they're a solid to good football team in the SEC. And on certain weeks at home, they could beat an Alabama and a down year in the SEC. They can compete with a Texas, but they can't go on the road and compete versus good football teams in the SEC. And at home, they still kind of struggle with them. So they're number 10. Number 9, I have Arkansas. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You have no idea what to expect from this team. I'm hoping to see a lot more Dr. Jekyll here, because this team, to me, I just don't know what to expect on a week in and week out basis. And it comes down to Talon Green. Bobby Petrino calls a pretty good game for Talon Green. Sometimes he executes, sometimes he doesn't. If he's not executing, then get blown out. If he is executing, they can compete again with a lot of teams in the SEC. They beat Tennessee, then they get destroyed by Ole Miss. Then they blow out Mississippi State, who I don't think is as bad as the record says. Yeah, they're a bad football team, but 63 to 20 something? That's very impressive no matter who it is, putting up 63 points at 600 yards of offense. So very confusing team. We'll see what they do versus my Texas Longhorns this week. Big rivalry game. I think they'll give it a hell of a fight. Honestly, they could win if Talon Green has a great game. If he doesn't, they're going to get blown out. That's my opinion on them. Number 8 is LSU. Coming into the season, I thought Missouri and LSU were the two most overrated teams in the SEC. I've been right on both of them. Missouri's not that good, and LSU's not that good. They can't beat the big boys of the SEC. They're not going to beat the Bamas. They're not going to beat the Texas. They're not going to beat the Georgia. Can they compete with basically everyone else? Yes. Defensively, they struggle mightily with running quarterbacks. We've seen that versus Lenora Sellers. We saw that with Jalen Milroe. I don't know how you're not able to get that soft, especially on a bye week, and you know what Alabama wants to do with Jalen Milroe, and they just kept killing you with it all last night with Jalen Milroe, over 150 yards rushing on only like 12 attempts. I think it was 195 on 12 attempts. Pathetic. The defense is better, but not good enough for an LSU team that needed it to be a lot better, because their offense was never going to be as good as it was last year. So they're my number 8 team. I think this is where you start to move into a different tier of teams that are truly can compete in the SEC championship picture. There's one team you haven't seen yet, and that's South Carolina. We'll get to a little bit later. That because of record they won't. But let me tell you, if they would have beaten LSU, didn't get screwed by the officials, and Lenora Sellers get injured, they definitely could have made the SEC championship game. Number 7, Texas A&M. Only weakness on this team to me is the quarterback. I don't know who you're going to play at quarterback. I think Marcel Reed's the answer in the future, but for this year, he's not that good, but neither is Connor Wegman. So I think you kind of have to go with the guy that will get you there in the future, and that's why you ride with Marcel Reed. But do I think you can win the SEC with Marcel Reed? No. Do I think you can get to the playoff with Marcel Reed? Yes. Do I think you'll win a game? Possibly, depending on matchup. But I think that's the highest you'll get out of this Texas A&M team, but that's what I have them here. Number 6, South Carolina. Again, if they didn't lose to LSU, this is a team I would not want to play in the college football playoff. That front four is the best in the country. Let me repeat, it is the best front four in the country. It's one of the 5 or 6 front sevens. The linebackers aren't as good as the front four, but still really damn good. Secondary is not too bad. The only weakness of this team is the offensive line, because Lenora Sellers and Rocket Sanders are both dynamic football players, especially running for Lenora Sellers and Rocket Sanders, obviously. But that's really the only weakness. If they can get that settled going into next year, this team can compete in the SEC like at a pretty upper echelon level. Dylan Stewart's not going anywhere, and that guy's a freak. So scary team. I'm glad Texas doesn't play him going down the stretch. Can definitely throw a monkey wrench into this whole thing. Number 5 is Georgia. And the weakness here is the quarterback position, kind of like A&M. Carson Beck, 10 touchdowns, 12 interceptions in SEC play. Yuck. That ain't going to get it done. And there's a chance he comes back next year. And I don't think you want that as a Georgia fan. He has not looked good this year. He's looked really bad. If this was last year's draft class, he's probably like the number 10 or 11 quarterback coming out, and he probably would come back. But right now he's number 6. And I don't really know who could pass him. I guess Curtis Rourke for Indiana. But it's a weak draft class, and he's lucky if he decides to come out, because he probably will get drafted as like a 4th-round pick. But any other draft class, he's like a 6th or 7th-round pick. He's not been good. And they don't have the weapons around him, to be fair, but still. Turns the ball over way too much. Ole Miss, great win yesterday. Biggest win by the Lane Kiffin era. Honestly, the biggest one for Lane Kiffin in his career as a college football head coach, but definitely the biggest win at Ole Miss. Really scary team going forward. Trey Harris should be coming back at some point. I'm hoping that will unlock them completely. Well, I'm not hoping because we might play him, but they're really good on the offensive side of the ball. Jackson Hart's playing the best ball of his career. And then that defensive front is scary. It's the second best defensive front in the SEC, in my opinion. I think South Carolina and then Ole Miss and then probably Texas A&M. But they're scary up front. They dominated that Georgia offensive line, and maybe they can do that going forward. Who knows? I think the best version of Ole Miss could probably win a national championship. The question is, will you get that on week in and week out basis? Number 3, Alabama. I think Alabama, to me, if you gave me an A game from everyone in the country, is probably the best team in the country. Again, do you get that A game every week? No, but when you get it, it's scary. Jalen Milroe's doing it with his legs and then hitting you deep through the air. That's how they do it. And they look damn good doing it. And if their defense can play to the first half level of the Georgia game or to this LSU game, they can win a national championship. Again, can I see this consistently? It'd be nice to see. If you can do that, you can win a national championship. And that's been the kind of the theme of the whole college football season. I don't know who can do it consistently. I don't know who can win 3 or 4 games in a row in the playoff. Can Alabama? It's to be seen. We'll see what happens. Number 2 is Tennessee. Quarterback is the weakness here. Hopefully Dylan Sampson is healthy because he's the strength on that offense along with that defense. That's the strengths of the team. And if Nico can just play consistently and not turn the ball over, I think they can compete for an SEC championship. I think they can win a national championship because that defense and that run game is that good. But can Nico do that? I do not know. That's the question. They are number 2 for right now. And guys, you can debate like honestly 1 through 7. I have no idea who's the best team in the SEC. I have Texas here. One of only 2 teams with one SEC loss and only 1 loss in general. The only other team with 1 loss is Tennessee. So sorry, 3 teams, Texas A&M being one of them, Tennessee, and then Texas. 1 loss in the SEC each. 2 losses for A&M overall, 1 loss for Tennessee and Texas overall. Can Quinn Ewers be what he was pre-injury? I think you've seen glimpses of that. You saw that versus Florida. He had his highest PFF grade for passes over 20 yards downfield, so that's really good to see. He played better in the Vanderbilt game. If you get that version of Quinn Ewers, the Florida, Vanderbilt, Michigan version, you can win a national championship. If you don't, then it's kind of the same as everyone else. You win 1 or 2 games and then get bounced. You're not winning a national championship. That's my question here. Can they do it? Can they be more consistent in their running game as well? We will have to see. But those are my rankings. It's getting harder and harder every week. Usually throughout the season, things become more clear. I think this is the most muddied college football has been in a very long time, probably 2007. So again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. This is another edition of the SEC Power Rankings. Join us every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time for the SEC show. We change it up, so 7 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you guys for being here.